In this video, I would like to have a look at a game of Magnus Carlsen, which he played at the Superbet Blitz event in Warsaw. The last couple of days we have been looking at the rapid section, which was surprisingly won by the local hero Jan Christoph Duda. He is in the lead, now entering the 2 days of Blitz, but you know, with 18 games still to go, a lot of things can happen, and keep in mind it's Blitz, short time control, a lot of blunders and a lot of interesting opening ideas as well. Magnus Carlsen is playing with the white pieces against Kiril Shevchenko from Ukraine, who is actually now representing Romania. And the game is very interesting because the way Magnus is playing it makes chess look so simple. But after watching this video, you probably have the feeling I want to play chess like that as well. But believe me, things are not that simple at all. Let's have a look. E4, C5, knight f3, knight c6, and now Magnus plays the move knight c3, which is an interesting idea because it's still not clear what white exactly wants. Does he want to play the open Sicilian, or would he like to go for a more closed type of Sicilian with a move like bishop b5 next? Well, black can still play here the move e5, which is a move played often by Magnus Carlsen himself. The idea is to prevent white from ever playing the move d4, as black is taking control over that central square. But Shevchenko decides differently, plays the move g6, interesting move, but now we are going to see the open Sicilian anyway, and it's a Sicilian Dragon with a bishop on g7. This is usually leading to very sharp play. Look at this bishop, it's a really good piece, exerting pressure on the knight on d4, so white protects it with the move bishop e3 and now knight f6. Well, this is still a very well-known opening line, has been played thousands of times, including Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces himself. He has been playing it quite a number of times. And the line he is opting for, it's very interesting. He goes for a sideline. The main move for white is just to develop the bishop to c4. It's the most active square. The bishop will drop back to b3 from where it's guarding its queen side, but at the same time this bishop will exert a lot of pressure on this diagonal. But Magnus Carlsen has his own ideas and decides to place the knight on b3, which is an absolute sideline. And what is the idea of this move? At first it looks very strange to drop back with the knight voluntarily from the center, but the knight is kind of holding the queen side together, it's stable there, and it avoids the exchange of knights anytime soon. Black goes for d6, so now the idea is to go knight g4. As the bishop covers the g4 square, the knight would really like to trade off the bishop on e3. Therefore, white goes f3, very typical move in the Sicilian Dragon. You're supporting the pawn, and there are also other ideas which we are going to see very soon. Black castled, and after the move queen to d2, black played here the move bishop to e6. Of course, had the knight still been on d4, a move like bishop e6 is absolutely less attractive. There are ideas for white to capture with a knight on e6, but okay, this is a disadvantage that the knight is on b3. The bishop can be developed to a very active square. White castles queenside, very logical move, and now we get a very sharp position with opposite castled kings, which means that white's going to attack on one side and black on the other. And no surprise, we will get to see a decisive result in this game. How should black proceed from here? Well, there are a lot of different ways of trying to initiate an initiative on the queen side. A move like rook c8 is very logical. A move like queen c7 with the idea to get the other rook over to c8 also makes a lot of sense, so that later on you will try to consider pushing these pawns somehow, even if that would mean that you're going to lose a pawn. Just try to open the file so that your strongest pieces are able to attack the white king. That is a very typical strategy for these positions with opposite castled kings. Shevchenko played here the move knight e5. It's also a very typical move. The knight is nicely placed in the center, and in certain cases it can also come to c4. White goes king b1, and now Shevchenko played here the move rook c8. And interestingly, this was still seen in a game of Magnus Carlsen himself, played at the World Cup in 2021. In that game against Grandmaster Martinovic, he played the move bishop e2, a very modest move, and objectively he didn't get much out of it. It's just a playable position. Black decided to play here the move bishop c4. Very interesting idea, with the point that you would like to come with a knight on c4, not allowing white to trade it off. Anyway, Magnus decided to play differently. And I should also mention that this pawn on a7, it's hanging, but you can never really take it. Because if you do take the pawn, there will follow b6 and this bishop is trapped. Very soon the bishop will be attacked by a rook move and you're going to win a piece as black. So don't take the pawn. And even if it would win a pawn, it's usually not an attractive pawn. As I mentioned, opening the files just helps black to build up an initiative against the white king. So therefore, white goes here for the move h4. Very important idea. I should also mention that very often in Sicilian Dragon, this move g4 is seen with the idea to go for g5. But here, with a knight on e5, g4 is not possible. The pawn on f3 is hanging. So white goes for h4. And now, big question for black. It's the eternal question how to react here with black. Are you going to allow white opening up the position with the move h5 so that the h-file gets opened and you get to see these ideas with bishop h6? White would love to trade off this bishop on g7, and once the h-file is open, the queen and the rook, they can work together and there will appear a lot of mating threats against the black king. Maybe this time things are not that dangerous and there are ways for black to ignore it. Maybe just play a move like a6, trying to prepare b5. Even the move knight h5 is a very interesting idea with plans of, well, first of all, stopping white from playing the move h5, but in certain cases the knight can even come to g3. Anyway, Shevchenko played the move h5, which is a very radical way of preventing white from opening up the h-file, but at the same time, it's a weakening move. And as a rule of thumb, you're supposed not to play too many pawn moves in front of your king. White goes bishop e2. Looks like a very modest move, but the bishop is overprotecting the pawn and white would like to prepare the move g4. The move a6 played. And now, interesting moment. The move g4 could be played, but here Magnus first goes for the move bishop to d4. I believe this is a very useful move and it sets a little trap, because if black would be careless and plays here the move b5, which is the main idea of playing a6, then all of a sudden we get to see Magnus style. He is going to trade off all the pieces. Bishop takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, rook takes, and now the knight comes into c5. And this is very dangerous because white has basically an extra pawn on the queen side with a lot of threats against the pawn on a6, can even triple the pawns on the e-file. If you play rook to d6, then white can even consider playing a4, and white is the one having a very big initiative in this endgame as he is about to generate play against these pawns. Therefore, don't allow bishop takes e5 followed by the exchange of queens. Shevchenko played queen c7. It's a good move. And now taking on e5 is less impressive. There's nothing you can do. The double pawns are not a problem. White is missing its dark squared bishop in order to build up an attack, unable to remove the defender in front of black's king. White played the most aggressive move, g4. That's the move we would like to see. And here again, how should you react to this move? In the game there followed h takes g4. Should be said that maybe b5 would have been a better move, just to ignore the plan of white. White would like to take on h5, and if you take back, the move f4 is really strong. Look, now white is making a lot of progress. Step by step, more files are getting opened. White is going to take on h5, gonna take on g7 with a lot of active piece play against the black king later on. The rook can come to the g-file and so on. However, the machine said that after g takes h5, black is not interested in recapturing, but is going to play the move b4, counterattacking the knight on c3. If the knight comes into d5, it's the most active square, you can, for instance, take e takes d5, and now just put the bishop on f5, and the bishop is an excellent attacking piece, hitting the pawn on c2 together with the queen and rook. The bishop even defends the pawn on g6. This is far from clear, and even there are ideas to follow up with a5 and a4. Black definitely has counterplay. But it's a blitz game. Shevchenko played impulsive move h takes g4. And now Magnus played here the move f4. Very interesting idea. Kicking the knight. What is the knight going to do? Well, there are problems to be solved here. The most natural move probably would be to play knight f3, initiating the exchange of pieces as you're attacking the queen and the bishop. But after bishop takes, g takes, white has the move h5. And so typical for this line, you're just don't care about the material. We are not planning to pick up the pawn. No, we are opening the files towards the black king. For instance, if you take, there's rook takes h5, exchange sacrifice. If you take it, we just continue here with the move f5, catching the bishop. If you take on b3, we take on g7, king takes g7, and now the queen comes in with check, king h7, queen takes h5. This is such a typical mating pattern, so often seen with the queen and rook, two open files. Black is absolutely helpless. So you see how dangerous white's attack can be potentially. I should also add that, of course, this line is not forced. Black doesn't have to take on h5. He can, for instance, take first on d4, but then the queen comes in, and after g takes h5, just be careful. Don't play rook g1. It's almost mate if the king goes away. It's mate on g7, but there is bishop to g4, and black succeeds in keeping the files closed. However, you understand what the defensive resource is. We got to stop that first. And the move f5, preventing the bishop from blocking on g4, is the key defensive idea. Next move, you're going to play rook g1, followed by mate on g7, or otherwise you just capture the bishop. So knight f3 doesn't work. In the game, Shevchenko went back with its knight to c6, but we will see this is also not a good idea. What is the machine suggesting here? And I believe that's such a very difficult move to find over the board, but especially in blitz, of course. It's the move b5, sacrificing the knight on e5. After f takes e5, d takes e5, you see that black does have 2 pawns for the piece. And you know, in these Sicilian Dragons, if pieces are coming off the board, sometimes such a pawn block can become very strong. But you understand, it's not an endgame yet. It's still very complicated. White is probably better, but still, you can put up some resistance, and at least black is not getting mated at the moment. In the game, there followed knight c6, and now look what Magnus is doing. He just took on f6. This is a fantastic decision, trading off the bishop for the knight. Black got to decide how to take back. Shevchenko recaptured with the bishop, the most natural move. I want to briefly mention that e takes f6 is probably not a good move. Not because you're going to take on d6. If that happens, then all of a sudden black plays f5, and look, this pawn on g4 is a huge asset. Instead, white will play here the move f5, try to open up the position. It's a pawn sacrifice. Black can take the pawn, but now the h-pawn comes in. It's about to come to h6. Knight d5 can be played. Maybe rook g1, queen f4. A lot of attacking ideas, and the position for white just plays itself. Therefore, black decided to recapture with the bishop on f6, and now knight d5 anyway. Excellent move. Big question is, what is black going to do now? The queen is hanging. You're threatening to take the bishop on f6. But for instance, if the queen would go away, you're not going to take the bishop. You're just continuing with your own attack. You're going to play h5, followed by moves like rook d to g1. Maybe f5 can be played, or first you take and then f5. The queen can come in. This is what we call a sort of a free attack. You've managed to open the files. Maybe if we do the material count, we quickly see that the number of pawns is not equal. Black is 1 pawn up, but it doesn't feel like that. All white's pieces are so close to the white king that you should just trust on the skills of your pieces. Therefore, black decided to trade off that knight on d5. Makes very logical impression, but after e takes d5, you have a new problem. This knight is under attack once again. If the knight comes forward to b4, just make sure that you don't take on b4, because that allows queen takes c2, followed by checkmate on b2. But you can play instead, just neutralize all the threats, simply play here the move c3. The knight is under threat, cannot go anywhere, white is going to win a piece. And if you play the knight to an inferior square, let's say you go backwards, then we continue with plans of playing h5 or maybe take on g4. Once again, it's like very nice way of neutralizing black's attacking chances, while at the same time white retains a huge initiative himself. But look, Shevchenko played knight d4, with the idea that if you take the knight, bishop takes, you shouldn't fall for queen takes d4. You're winning the bishop, but not for long, because there's queen takes c2 with check, king a1, and now black can simply take the bishop on e2. So that means that Magnus had to find a different plan and just took on g4. As simple as that. He is threatening the rook on c8, and you understand that queen takes c2 doesn't work because of queen takes. If you take with a knight, I'm going to take your rook. If the rook takes on c2, well, then I can just take on d4, and black cannot recapture because the rook will be hanging. So you see, there are a lot of problems. Rook is hanging, knight is hanging. If the rook goes away, the pressure along the c-file is gone, and now it's time to take on d4. As simple as that. Bishop takes d4, queen takes d4. Game over. White is a piece up. Shevchenko decided to take on b3, but now after a takes b3, we have a position still opposite castled kings, but also major pieces and opposite colored bishops, which means that the bishops can never compete with each other. The rook is under threat. If the rook would go away, let's say to b8, we just continue with h5. Simple plan of opening the files. If you do take on h5, this is same as suicide. You're going to play queen g2, bring the queen over to the file. You don't care the bishop can be taken, as look at the g and h file. It's just going to be made in a few moves. Bishop g7, rook d2, g1, game over. Next move, queen takes g7 with checkmate. You can try to move the rook away, but then bishop e6, discover check. King goes away and rook dg1. The position plays itself. Queen g8 is coming next. Game over. You see, it's very difficult to try to keep the files closed. For instance, if you play something like g5, after f takes g5, okay, the bishop goes away. These pawns, they are not offering a shield for the black king, as white is just going to continue with g6, remove the pawn, put the bishop on e6, and make sure that the pawns are being pushed or sacrificed so that the major pieces will do the job eventually. Very interesting line. In the game, you understand that Shevchenko thought he needs to do something. He thought, okay, I don't care about the exchange. I'm going to play a5, hoping that at some point maybe there's some sort of counterattack, but things are simply too slow. And now, maybe the most interesting moment of the game and the most instructive one, everybody would probably just take the material, but Magnus thinks, well, this bishop is just a really good piece. Why would I take the exchange? I'm just playing for an attack. He goes for h5, and now black goes for the move a4. Sort of desperate attempt. I mean, other moves, they lead to similar lines as we have seen. So after h takes g6, black cannot really recapture now. There's bishop e6, king g7, and now rook d2, g1. And look, once again, you have so many mating threats against the black king. If you do take on b3, the simplest move is rook takes g6. Excellent move. King takes, and now queen g2 check, and it's checkmate. You have to block with the bishop, and then it's queen takes g5, game over. So you see how much faster white is, and that's so important. It's not about material, it's about the speed of your attack. After h6, g6, black didn't recapture, decided to take on b3, and now you got to be a little bit careful. Don't bring your queen to the h-file, which is so tempting, threatening checkmate. But there's b takes c2, and black is the one giving a check, and all of a sudden it's white's king who is in trouble. Don't do that. Instead, keep it simple, and that's what Magnus did. He played c takes b3, the simplest move in the position. And okay, the c and the a file, they are both open, but there are no threats. Everything is very well under control. And once again, if you do take the pawn on g6, it's bishop e6, king g7, rook d to g1, with same ideas of taking on g6, followed by queen g2 and checkmate. This is just such a crushing mating attack. Instead of taking on g6, there followed the move rook a8. And it's the final move of the game already. It's move 25. It's a miniature. Magnus understands that there are no threats against his king and played here the move queen to h2. And there's nothing you can do against the mating threat on h7. The king cannot run away. If you move the rook, it's just going to be queen h7 and checkmate on f7. That is one line. And well, you can give a check on a1. That is just one check. You take the rook. The other rook can come over. You're happy to come back to b1. Your rook down and the mate on h7 still remains. So it's just game over and black resigned. I thought this was an absolutely incredible game of Magnus Carlsen, just defeating one of the most promising players in the world at the moment. Kiril Shevchenko is such an easy way. Okay, it's a blitz game, but still, I thought this was very instructive and I hope you liked it. If so, please give this video a like. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you would like to see more attacking games of Magnus Carlsen, or in general, how to crush the Sicilian opening. There's so much to learn from these kind of games. So I hope I will see you back very soon at the channel. Thanks for watching.